If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me again, I've got Josh. Josh, how are you doing today?
I am tired. I am so tired, Aaron.
I know. I got the full rundown before the podcast started here. So it's a fun thing.
Yeah, school is back in session for the children, which sounds like it'd be a great thing. You know, it sounds like it's going to be an easy time for those of us that work at home. It's going to be quiet in the house. It's going to be lovely. I'll have access to all of my snacks, and I can get up and go get a drink without being hassled 10 or 30 times to turn on the internet or to get the specific remotes. Or can I buy a game on Steam? You know, sounds like it'd be a great time. Sounds like it'd be easy.
It sounds like it'd be easy. I don't know. It seems more difficult than maybe you're letting on.
Yeah, these kids are intentionally making it more difficult. And I thought what would be a really easy encounter has become very stressful and is requiring me to do a lot of things that I wasn't happy with.
You weren't prepared for it. So I guess, just like your players might not be prepared for encountering a level of difficulty that you put in front of them. What do we do when we have to adjust the difficulty on the fly? And that is today's episode. We've talked about it in the past.
Episode?
What?
Is that today's episode? Is that what we're going to talk about?
Today's episode, where we talk about adjusting difficulty on the fly. We did mention it a couple of times. We've given a couple helpful hints, but I figured this really kind of deserves its own topic. Let's really dive into adjusting difficulty on the fly, because every GM, I don't care if you've been doing it for 50 years, I don't care if you've been doing it for 5 years, I don't care if you're doing it for 5 minutes. This is something that you need to have in your toolbox because you are going to encounter it. Believe me.
And it works both ways too. There are encounters that are way too easy and you need to maybe ramp it up a little bit more. And there are encounters that are just way too difficult and your players are not going to survive what you thought was going to be an easy time. Like having your kids go to school and being left alone in the house. Why is it so hard, man? Anyway, I think when I was writing up notes for this, I was thinking about this. The first thing that popped in my head was, and then the last thing that popped in my head was plan better encounters. I think that, we always talk about how it's very important to spend that time thinking about how to make a good encounter, to how to make an interesting event or why it should be there. Monsters and bad guys need to have motivations for them to be interesting. They have to be in interesting places. You've got an interesting setup where your players can move around in the environment. All that's great. But the actual fight itself, if we're talking about battling, you got to put some planning into some simple stats just to make it make sense. And this works pretty much in all systems, right? If it is a single target, if it's they're fighting a big bad guy, that big bad guy needs to be able to survive a big hit from all of your players. If you go into one round and everybody just drops nukes and it doesn't last a round, that wasn't a good fight. They don't really get to have the enjoyment of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, so this is the tough thing here. Is I would like to say this. The problem is simply plan better encounters, which is true. You should put thought and effort into your encounter, but just as though you're a bad guy, you could go on a hot streak, you'd be rolling dice real good. You could crush your players and vice versa, they can crush you. So, just be prepared that, it's not the end of the world if your players roll and just get extremely lucky. I've seen, 3 nat 20s pop up in a row and, just decimate whatever target is in front of you. And that's called just getting lucky and just crushing the bad guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Like that's
what I'm saying is not that, it doesn't happen. It's that you should be prepared for certain things. If you need to make an adjustment to an enemy's hit points because a fight is going one way or the other way, it's always great to have more than less to start with.
Yes, because you can, again, I think we talked about the general rules and we're going to probably get into them here, which is it's generally easier to subtract things. Like if something's too difficult, toning down the difficulty always feels better because it doesn't feel cheap.
Yeah.
It feels cheap if something's too easy, and then you're just like, it's way more difficult than I originally told you it was.
Yeah. And it's always good to have like your player. We've talked about this before. It's always good to give things to your players and take them away. And that's the same thing with a fight. If it looks like a fight is going poorly and they're able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, then they're going to feel great about it. But if you just like sort of, they're stomping on guys and suddenly the guys turn around and they're twice as big, unless there's a valid reason for it, it's going to feel like you're cheating them out of their victory, and that's no good. So having big hit points for a single target, great, because you can always drop it later.
So to your point, to be able to survive a big hit from a player or the average of your players' big damage dealers is probably a good place to start. Okay. Maybe even like 70%, they roll very well, everybody, but they don't all like exceed and like do the maximum sort of thing like that. The big bad guys should be able to survive at least 70% of the damage that they are capable of doing within a single round. They should probably have more than that, but you never know what it's gonna happen.
Yes. Well, and to that point, like if you are in a system that has defense, AC, some sort of shielding ability or something like that, it should be on the high end of what your players can hit. It shouldn't just be like a sponge fest, just like smacking the crap out of the bad guy. It could be difficult to hit him, and you can use that as a means to reduce your what damage is coming in as well. And it's easier once again, like, hey, they were smacking this guy for a while, and now his shielding is dropped, and it's easier to hit him rather than, you're punching the crap out of him, so he pulls shields up. You can make that as, reasonable in a fight, but it does cheapen it a little bit.
As long as you don't divulge the DC or AC they're trying to hit, you're pretty okay to drop it within like 1 to 2 points throughout the combat, because your players functionally won't notice it unless like they're hitting the minimum DC that you have set. Once that happens, then you sort of have to come up with a thematic reason as to why the DC changes. And that's not a terrible thing to do if like it's totally outside your player's realm. But again, planning a good encounter would be positioning a bad guy that has a DC that's difficult to obtain but achievable.
Yeah. The high end of what your players can hit.
Yes.
And that also goes in the inverse, right? So we're talking about making a bad guy that's got enough hit points to survive, a good amount of damage from your players, that's got AC or a DC for hit that's high enough that your players can achieve. It's not outside of their range, but it's on the higher end. It goes.
You don't want it to be at the top of their range. Like, it can't be at like the very like only 2 rolls of this dice could possibly hit it. Like, that's not a good feeling.
Or like completely locking out one player from being able to hit
Yes.
the bad guy is kind of a jerk move. The flip also works is that the bad guy should be able to do enough damage to your players that it puts them in danger, but doesn't outright kill them with like a single hit. Because once again, that's not fun.
Yes, mortal danger is good. Mortal danger makes anything feel better, especially if you decide to adjust on the fly. So being able to damage your characters in such a way that there feels the damage makes it feel like there are stakes to be had, that yes, your character will die. Even if your intention is not necessarily to kill them with the encounter, that they should prevail based on like the way that you've structured the encounter, it still feels good when it's like, well, is this gonna kill me?
Yeah. And I think that, if you're talking about a single target, that's great. But a easier thing to balance around, and especially to make adjustments to, is groups, multiple targets. Because if you got a lot of little guys spread out, things can happen. You can do more with them. And I think that if you've got multiple targets, there's a couple of ways to build a good encounter that's easier to deal with adjustments. Okay. You should have a mix of long range and short range guys, monsters, bad guys, mobs, whatever you want to call them. That your short range should be tanky and beefy, but don't do much damage. Your range guys, very easy to take out, but they're at range, so they can do more damage. Your standard glass cannons versus meat shields. It's a nice way to go about things, and it provides targets for players to engage in. Once again, the higher the hit points, the easier it is to drop them without noticing. The bigger the damage that they can do, you can always reduce that if it needs to. Make it thematic. Don't make it obvious that you're making these changes. Make it on the fly as needed.
Yeah, again, multiple targets gives you a big out in terms of like imbalanced characters as well. So multiple targets can be used to attack different sets of people with different, capable monsters to make it feel challenging for them, but not overwhelming as though what some of these other monsters or targets would be for the players. So you're able to use a wide variety of stats against them. And again, the purpose of the key with subtraction here too, not just lowering their HP, but should you have too many targets, there are reasons why when the players potentially flip the field or start killing off targets, that the multiple targets might retreat. Okay. Yep. So you can get rid of, enough targets that effectively it makes sense from a thematic standpoint that things would potentially retreat.
Yeah. And, if you've got the options and they're spread out, it's easier for guys to disappear, to run away when they see battle going the wrong way for them. It also lets your players spread out, and it's easier to do one-on-one encounters that way. Those are a lot easier to deal with as opposed to like a big guy that's hitting for a massive amount of damage against a guy that can't take it. Because you've got different mobs may have different values.
Mm-hmm.
So if you plan a good encounter, it may not be as necessary to make adjustments, or it may be easier to hide the adjustments on the fly. But it's important to be able to spot when you need to make the adjustments.
Now, mind you, because you do have players that have multiple capabilities, all that sort of stuff, you're at some point you're inevitably going to run into the problem that requires this adjusting. Like I said, like this is a problem that's almost intractable for a GM because you can't force your players to all optimally prepare for a combat and be prepared for an encounter. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen, and embrace the fact that it's going to happen. And, hopefully some of these tips as we continue on will be able to help you get through, the problem that is the different players.
Yeah, so I was going over and I was thinking about like the times that I've had to make adjustments. And I think the number one time that I've had to make adjustments to my encounters has been the moon is in its phase and like Mercury's in retrograde or whatever the hell is going on, and nobody can roll for anything.
The unlucky situation where your players couldn't roll themselves out of a paper bag. They want to they're rolling so bad that like it's just like predetermined that they're going to die.
I've used number generators. I've had dice on the table. Like we've switched out dice. Like you're not allowed to touch that anymore style, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes rolls are just bad, and you have to work with it because it feels so cheap to have good plans, good actions, powerful characters, and just roll after roll after roll of failure that seems completely out of your hands. Like it's just a bad night.
This is almost the worst situation to have, when you have to adjust difficulty because your players just can't save themselves with a good roll. Okay. This is the one that generally feels the worst if you have to do it. Okay?
I've got ways around it. I've done this and I've made it feel good. And I'll tell you what the big trick is if, and I don't know why, if all the rolls suck, all it takes is one thing to go right for them, and everything will turn around. It's it's not gambler's fallacy or the luck of the gambler or whatever it is. It does seem to help when one thing goes right for your players. It can turn the tide of just like a series of bad rolls. The other times that I would imagine, and I've probably done this myself, that had to make adjustments are players are destroying all the mobs way too quickly and without any effort. That's always, like you're planned on a bigger encounter. You've got some things you want to show them. It's going to be fun times, but they are just rolling like gods and destroying everything.
On the flip side of this one, I generally let this one go. Okay.
Yeah.
I generally do because it's rare enough that your players are all going to be lucky at the same time. It's usually like one person has like the hot hand, and the rest of your players, again, couldn't throw it in the ocean. I mean,
I agree. I usually let this one go. However, I may just hold off. Like, hey, they're gonna smite the crap out of this group. Let's push it for one more round, just to have a little bit of fun, to make them feel like they earned it. Okay, and it's you really give them the ability to like feel like they've done a good job here. Yeah, they're rolling like they're on fire and they're doing a great job, and the bad guys pull out a last ditch effort to survive and fail at it. Oh, it feels so good. If you just stomp on them, sometimes it feels like, oh, where's the actual bad guy that we're supposed to be fighting?
It doesn't work well if they have basically two of these encounters in a row. Okay, like the first time it happens, it feels great. But let's say you're in a dungeon and like the next encounter happens the exact same way. then your players no longer have like a threat of being hurt or dying within like the scenario, and they get cocky, and then things get like you then you got all sorts of other problems, or they stop engaging with the content that you've got in like a good way. So being able to rein it back in is important. So if you do have something where like they decimate the mobs, and then you go into the next encounter, they start doing it all over again. They're just like they're cracking their rolls. They're rolling max damage or like 90% of their max damage. You know, at that point in time, that's when like it's like okay, and then this thing happens, and it turns the tide of the combat itself to make combat feel more weighty and more difficult. You know, it's being easier as long as you don't change the mob in front of you. You can always adjust any other encounter within their path that's going to get progressively more difficult. Like, let's say you undertune the first one, they just stomp all over it. Okay, that's good learning for you to understand that I underplanned this. Time to beef up the rest of the monsters in the dungeon here, and so the next encounter it will feel better for the players, or if you have more meaning in terms of the combat.
Yeah, and you can always explain it away as it was a training fight. You're just learning the encounter here. It was an easy one. And then of course the last
those harpies were yellow. These ones are blue.
Yes, of course. Just wait till you get to the red ones. The last reason you'd make adjustments are when your players are dying too quickly, and it's not that they're rolling poorly; they're rolling just fine. They're getting smoked.
Yeah, you're either rolling too good or you've overtuned your encounter. Like, and it's just like they're getting mopped by what you've got in front of them.
And I've done this one when I've tuned it around everybody showing up, and then one guy doesn't show up. And
don't plan your counters around a single person.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's like, okay, well, he doesn't do a lot of damage, and then it turns around, and you're like, oh, but everybody sort of synergizes with that, and there's like a whole thing going on. And just sometimes it's just like a little bit can make a big difference in a fight, and that's just something you got to remember. So I know
these are all situations you're going to encounter. You're going to have to figure out how to adjust. You're not going to figure it out. These are ways that I'm suggesting you change things to adjust for them. You can come up with your own methods too, but these are ones that have sort of worked. When players are dying too quick, I generally have that's generally where I just do tone down the monster, or I get it. So might not be in the spirit of the game, but you don't have to have your monster hit the DC they need to clobber your players into oblivion every turn. Okay. That doesn't mean that it doesn't need to hit the players. Okay. I'm not saying suddenly it just can't, hit the broadside of a barn. No, it's just that, it happens to miss this time. Okay. And, little things like that can change the mood and the attitude of the players, which is like, oh, I got lucky there. And then, perhaps they start thinking better about their encounter, or they come up with a better plan. And, it can give them that slight edge to change something with the monster. It's different than just changing like the HP and all that other stuff that goes along with the monster.
Yeah, I've done reducing the armor class, the AC or the DC to hit, so that it's easier for the players to hit, maybe, knock off more damage, do bigger hits. And you can always tie it back to like, there was a skill that the monster was using, or like some sort of spell is worn off on them. And if you've got like a single mob and they're all coming at it, you could have your players get into a position. You're like, roll some sort of perception check, and you can see like there's an amulet hanging from his belt that's providing the shimmer around him that's protecting him, and players can grab that, and it's no longer active. It won't work for their players, but now the monster is easier to hit. And you can give them things like that in a fight, so it doesn't feel like, oh, you guys just suck at this, so I'm going to make it easier on you. Give them an out, give them a way to be better in a fight that isn't going well for them. And yeah, you can maybe they do a little additional damage with their attacks each round to reduce the amount of hit points the mob has. You can make adjustments like that on the fly. It makes it feel better when they're getting bigger hits, especially if you threw way too much hit points on a monster. And you can do these things to give your players more, so that they feel like they're making the changes on the monster, rather than you just adjusting it so that they don't suck so bad.
Okay, yeah. Again, there are more thematic ways to change it as well. So again, we talked about ideally what you want to do is you want to have something more difficult than what the players could handle, and you want to be able to adjust that difficulty down. But it's not always the case.
No.
Okay. And so sometimes you need to make things harder for the players, and you want to do it in such a way that the players are not going to feel like you're just making this harder for me because we're clobbering your monster. Okay. Or we're clobbering your big bad guy or whatever it is. This is easier to do if the monster was already very strong. Okay. Because it thematically feels better. Okay. Because I'll use the first one that you have listed there, which is use a potion or a spell to increase the defense. Okay. If your AC was a 12, okay, and now it's a 23, okay,
it made it a little weak.
That is like good.
Yeah.
No.
No. But like if it's a small amount, if you can make a small adjustment to make it fit the level of difficulty you'd like, great. And you can theme it as like a spell or a potion, or you can even have, if you've got multiple monsters, you can have one of them casting buffing spells or healing spells or something like that. And now you've created a target, you've created more going on in a fight, and it makes the encounter more interesting. It gives you a little something for your players to do. And it doesn't feel like they're just crushing guys. It feels like they're crushing guys, and the guys are so worried they're pulling out the big guns to try and prevent getting decimated.
Yeah, calling in the cavalry makes a lot of sense to turn the fight. Okay, like especially if you're supposed to be fighting something that's very strong, probably the leader or like a general or lieutenant or something higher up within the organization of monsters or evil men that you're fighting. Okay, and it makes sense that they could potentially call support, which is a good thing to do. It's less less obvious that you've changed something. When there are more targets, then you go from that single target into the multi-target world, and like we said earlier, it's a lot easier to change things that are happening in multi-target. A lot of chaos makes it a lot harder for your players to pick up on some subtle tricks that you're doing to try and adjust the difficulty and change the flow of battle.
Now, all of that is super nice. Like you can make fights easier for your players. You can make fights more difficult for your players. Try not to, adding theme to all of this, making it make sense in the fight, making it make sense for your players, giving them something to do. make the fight interesting.
Generally speaking, I wouldn't make the fights more difficult. Okay, it's my own personal rule. If you've undertuned a fight against something that was supposed to be really powerful, you just gotta kind of suck it up and accept that your players are gonna steamroll it.
Yeah. If it's a fight that they're going to encounter like 3 or 4 times, the first fight is going to be the easy one, and then you can tune it before they get to the next fight. If it's
don't gauge your players' abilities before putting the really big encounter you want in front of them, so that way you know how to adjust it. This also helps too with like luck. Okay, if you can gauge abilities in a very easy encounter. See if your players are rolling really poorly tonight. See if your players are on fire tonight. You know, is luck with them? Is luck without them? You know, are they doing silly things that just like don't make any sense in combat? They come up with bad plans, habitual bad planners. I don't know. You know, these are all things that you can learn from a very simple encounter, and then you can ramp up the difficulty appropriate to how your characters are acting that night, whether it's goofy or not.
Yeah. You can also just design some encounters around like auto adjusting difficulty. Like we talked about, you know, making changes to the stats or to the numbers, or, you know, planning around specific types of you know, player versus monster. But you can also just have a fight that's difficulty agnostic. Right? And I have been toying with these, and I've planned a couple of encounters, and I've played with them, and they're very enjoyable. A lot like D&D, these fights, they turn into slap fests, right? Your players run up to a monster, and they slap it until it dies, and then they run up to the next one. And you know, fine. But you can put effort into moving around, making interesting encounters that have sort of an adjustment in difficulty. There's a couple ones where if you give your players a series of actions that make the bad guys or the bad guy vulnerable, things they can do in the fight. And so they've got actions to do. And then it's, you can give, you know, that weak encounter, that simple guy that's got the low AC and the low hit points, but it can't take any damage until these other things have happened. So you've got to run around and like hit levers or, you know, move things into place. So it's actions based rather than just run up and destroy. And it's more enjoyable for your players, because then it's also not, you know, based around, are they rolling well or are you rolling well? It's entirely around performing the actions, coordinating, and getting, you know, having a plan come together, rather than just straight up slapping a guy until he's, you know, a big pile of welts and bones and blood. I like, there's one where we had the bad guy up on a platform, can't be reached. You know, he's performing some sort of ritual, and the players needed to get on certain tiles at the end of a round, and it lowered the platform. If they weren't on those tiles at the end of the turn, the platform goes back up. And so they had to coordinate moving in and out to do the fight. And it's in a place where you've got to come around. You can't see the bad guy from your tiles. So the players were moving around a lot more in the encounter. You can put little mobs in, that sort of thing, give them other targets to deal with that aren't very difficult. But the bad guy doesn't take much damage. Or doesn't need to take much damage. There's a lot going on. I had another one where, you know, you've got layer actions in D&D, and layer actions allow you to do certain things. One of the ones I had was bad guy has two layer actions, had no attacks of his own. Okay. His layer actions where he pointed to a spot on the floor and it would start to glow. And he pointed to a spot on the floor that was already glowing, and that would light on fire for that round. So your players would see a thing on the floor, they would have to move, and as long as they were paying attention,
well, you don't stand on the thing that's going to light on fire the next round.
You just move out of its way. And so, like, as long as they weren't standing on the thing that lit on fire on that guy's turn, they were fine. But it let your players move around and do things, and it wasn't, if they stood in the fire, they got a problem. That does a lot of damage. But they don't have to. It gives them an out without having to adjust the difficulty of the hits or of, the amount of damage that the monster's taking. It lets your players adjust the difficulty by seeing the environment. By planning.
Yeah, again, so KYP, you gotta have players who like that sort of thing. This also, so some of these tips work better for D&D, where, like you said, like they kind of become the slap fest, or other systems in which this is the case. Okay, because if the fight is a long drawn out slap fest, it makes more sense to have more interactive things that can be done on the field. Okay. In Call of Cthulhu, I don't know that this necessarily makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Okay? But you're going to be having different style encounters at that point.
Yeah. Yes. What I'm saying is try to thematically understand the basis of your game and then think about how you can augment an encounter based on the style of the game. Okay. Because again, Call of Cthulhu is way more lethal, for example, than any fight from D&D. D&D, once you get to the higher levels, it is like wow.
Well, and we did the same sort of thing in Cyberpunk. You had a lot of the actions that can be done are social actions, are encounters and stuff like that. They're less about the fights. And if you want to have an interesting fight, you should put some effort into making it interesting through the way that it's built. And I pulled a lot from video games for this. I think that WoW or Final Fantasy 14, those big encounters, if you look at some of those boss encounters, making your players move, making them do certain things, have certain actions, having different phases in a fight. If you want to have a really good boss fight that you can adjust the difficulty, you can build phases. And so players, have a hard time at this thing. Okay, well, it goes into the next phase and it's a lot easier for them to fight. Right?
Yes. I mean, like, again, a phased fight works in it. There's a level of KYP to that. I would also say that if you've established that like there are phases to like different encounters that you have, like thematically I like it from like a video game standpoint. In a lot of my role-playing games, it in a lot of ways can feel cheap. Like it makes sense that is probably like the best get out of jail free card that you've got is to have a second phase to this bad guy that you're fighting. Okay. But at the same time, it just doesn't always, in my opinion, it doesn't feel good to do that unless, early on you do some like smaller encounter and there's a multi-phase thing. It's like, okay, this is the world that you've established that bad guys have, all bad guys more or less have a multi-phased approach to them. They are a thing that stuff changes as the fight goes on.
Yeah.
And like, that as long as you establish that early on, then I think it makes sense. If you don't establish that early on, then I feel like doing this can really like, in the 11th hour feel really cheap.
Yeah, and if you establish it early on, with like simple things, like big
Talking like
big
night one. Okay.
night one, or like, it's a new chapter of the story and they're facing off new types of enemies. Have it happen with the low level enemies. This may be a campaign that's been for a while, but you have to like, you make a break. It's a new story. It's new types of enemies, new area, whatever it is. Then you can establish it. But even the weak stuff may have like phases, like a simple boss. You can build that sort of thing up, and it can be a really nice way to adjust difficulty on the fly, but also make fights more interesting for your players. And I think the only reason that we're talking about adjusting difficulty on the fly anyway is because we want these encounters to be fun for your players.
Yeah, you want the, again, just like we talk about dressing up, the environments you're around, just so we talk about, improving encounters, improving your audio and your magic and your social scenes and all this. This is a way to improve your encounters, that anytime you have an encounter, anytime you have a combat, it becomes more fun. You're trying to maximize the fun that you have in it. It's like a major part of games in general. You're going to spend a lot of time in combat. You might as well make it be very enjoyable and feel epic, especially when you get to that big bad evil guy, your final boss, or bigger encounters within the game. You want to be able to let them live up to sort of the epic hype that you've perhaps been building to for, weeks, months, whatever, the length of time it is. You don't want to let down your players with, and he shows up and you throw a fireball at him and it's a critical hit and he smolders and turns to ash.
Yeah, like, what was this threat that was taking over the entire kingdom? Who was this guy that had, rained down hellfire from satellites above? Why did it take me coming up here and slapping in the face one time to stop this shenanigans? So
smack. No.
Oh,
I guess I will have to stop now.
I know I toppled nations, but nobody said no to me before. Like, it's the fights should be interesting. They should be fun. They should feel engaging. A fight against a difficult enemy should feel threatening. It should feel like it could be deadly. And if it doesn't, or if it feels, so impossible for your players to succeed, that's also not fun. If there's no way that they can survive a fight and there's no out, then that's not fun either. So, yeah.
There we go. Anything else you want to add to this, Josh?
Yeah, one thing.
What?
One very important thing. If you're going to have a bunch of minions show up in a fight, and I think, if you got like a big bad evil guy and he's doing a thing and he brings in a bunch of mobs, to like sort of adjust difficulty, you could do this, every round, bring in a couple of extra guys, make them real stupid easy. Like 1 hit point guys, 1 hit, take out a guy, so that there's targets on the field. And it gives your players something to do, and it still can be like, it can be a level of difficulty without being difficult.
There you go.
Yeah. Mausers.
If you have any thoughts on adjusting difficulty on the fly, if you like some of the tips we gave, or if you have some of your own, let us know. levelupgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupgaming. Also, the podcast is on YouTube, so you can smash the like button there, subscribe there if that's your listening medium. Otherwise, go to your favorite podcasting site to download the podcast, review it, recommend it to a friend, all those good things. And that wraps up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.